Sprint planning is one of the 4 formal inspect and adapt opportunities in the Scrum framework. It has a time box, which means a maximum time of 8 hours for a 1-month sprint. But if our sprint is shorter, that time box will typically be shorter as well. The sprint planning is the first event of the sprint. As soon as it's finished, that event signals the start of our sprint. It's an opportunity, sprint planning, to get the whole Scrum team together, to decide what we want to do in the upcoming sprint, what value we want to create, and how we want to do it. Really, it comes down to 3 questions: the why, the what, and the how. Taking that first question then, the why. Why are we trying, or why are we expending this effort over the upcoming sprint? And it's answered through the creation of the sprint goal. The product owner will have engaged the stakeholders prior to the sprint planning event, considered the product backlog and also the market. He or she will have thought about what value, what hypothesis they want to create over the next few weeks. They take that to the developers and say, folks, what can you help me to deliver what is feasible? He or she trusts the developers, and together they craft a sprint goal. They answer the why. The second question, the what. Once we've considered as a Scrum team what the why is, why are we expending effort this sprint? And that's evidenced, remember, through our sprint goal. The developers need to put together a sprint backlog of how they think they're going to achieve it. Importantly there, as I think, the sprint plan, which is a combination of the sprint goal and the sprint backlog and their idea of how they're going to deliver it, is just a forecast. It's not something that is set in stone. It's populated through product backlog items that may well have existed and likely have existed at the top of the product backlog. But once the why has become clear, it's really common for the developers need to create new product backlog items to fill in the blanks, as it were, so that they have a plan to achieve that sprint goal. Once we've answered the why through the sprint goal and the what through the sprint backlog, we need to start considering the how. Now, this is typically where the developers get a little bit more technical. They start thinking about code, about the product, and start communicating from a position of their definition of done. Exactly how are we going to turn these product backlog items, this sprint backlog, into a usable increment? Just one final point to add. I've mentioned once that the sprint plan is a forecast. The sprint goal is the commitment. It's the value piece that the developers have committed to validating and helping the product owner to achieve in the upcoming sprint. And they've made a forecast of likely product backlog items that are needed to achieve that. The forecast is the important part. It's not a commitment. We don't necessarily share that all of these product backlog items are going to be executed. Forecast over simple execution of a list. That's a key takeaway for sprint planning. So to wrap up, the sprint planning is the first inspect and adapt opportunity within a sprint. It has an 8-hour time box when we are using a 1-month sprint. The outputs are a sprint backlog, a sprint goal, and importantly, transparency and commitment by the whole Scrum team so that we all know, as holding the 3 accountabilities, what each of us is needed to do to get us to a position of value. A nice way to explain this is using the metaphor of a treasure map. At sprint planning, the product owner says, there is some value over here, okay? He or she highlights the X on the treasure map to say value, treasure here. The developers, though, importantly, plan a route to get there. They aren't told upfront how they can get to this value. They need to plan and explore together.